Well, why don't you do that? That sounds like a good idea. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to pick the one that they drop to you casually. But since you are in the right place and have no axe to grind, you would rather do what they mentioned. But they still want you to exercise the task they gave you of coming up with some ideas. And as they hear some of the others, they might say, no, let's go with that. Do you see what we're saying? Mm-hmm. And that's the way it works.
I guarantee it's a lot better. It's never failed us. And a day never starts out where we have preconceived ideas of what we're going to do, unless it's going to the grocery store to pick up something. And I'm not even. I mean, that's the gospel right there.
That doesn't mean we even go to the grocery store.
That's right. That doesn't even happen if there's something else that happens. And that's only where we think we're going to go.
And that doesn't mean that we're unplanned or that we want to do everything extemporaneously. It doesn't mean that at all. It means we do make plans. We try to make plans, and we can never do it. Because we always leave the door open for the next instruction that comes, even though we have our plans laid out in case that instruction doesn't come. In other words, we will do those, but needless to say, when the instruction comes, no matter how insignificant it is, it's always a higher priority than any of the plans we might have laid out. And we're never disappointed.
So we don't know what side of our brain we're using. We better stop. It's getting late.
So, you got the last one.
Yes, sir. We wondered, after the suggestion came about the Horse Show, if there's a procedure to change our plans short notice. Because we're going to be we're on retreat now over the weekend.
See, we haven't gotten yours.
We haven't gotten it yet. Okay. We turned it in.
So we might as well talk about it. Don't you think? Where do y'all want to go? Well,
tomorrow?
We'll throw something else on there.
Sunday? You're on retreat Saturday and Sunday?
Well, could they...
They're movie tasking tomorrow? And they could go to the Horse Show at 1 o'clock on Sunday?
The Horse Show's tomorrow at 1 o'clock and Sunday at 1 o'clock. What other...
When was this Shakespeare thing happening?
No,
8:15. Oh, it doesn't start till August 3rd. Okay.
And it'll be for what, a couple of weeks?
We're pretty sure that this is the case, but not completely, that if we would go to, say, a Shakespeare thing on Sunday night, our retreat is Monday and Tuesday. That Sunday night activity would be one of the activities of the 2 days. Is that completely correct?
What do you mean?
You wouldn't go on Sunday night if your retreat didn't start on Sunday night.
Well, if we leave, we would start at 7:15 Sunday night. The 2 days are really Monday and Tuesday. But we technically were on retreat after 7:15, so like if there was an 8 o'clock.
Okay, some of you, when you were at retreat, did Links take you off someplace sometimes?
On the same night of your arrival. Yes, actually, if you don't start your retreat sooner than it would have normally started, then it can still be a consideration.
But then would that take the place of activity on like, would we then not go to Fair Park Day on
I think so. According to present instructions, you have a movie outing and you have another outing.
Right.
And if you went to Shakespeare on Sunday night, then your movie outing would be your only outing.
When is Shakespeare? And what night? Is it every night except Monday? Well, then I wouldn't plan my strategy to go on Sunday night.
Well, because they couldn't go on Tuesday night because they're off retreat on Tuesday, 7 o'clock. They'd have to go Sunday night.
I guess we were thinking they were very good show.
You see what I'm saying? Since it's closed Monday night,
Oh, yeah.
they'd have to go Sunday night.
Okay. Now, this is an exception, going at night, because of there being something, and what I've heard, those shows are very nice. And, in other words, they also, sometimes they have, musicals, other than, you know, it isn't just the Shakespeare thing, it's, they have other kind of musicals, plays and things like that are free. Now, I don't know if this Shakespeare thing will be the last one of the season, because school will be starting next month, I believe, and we may not have anything else planned. But you wouldn't plan anything at night unless it's something special like this. So I don't believe that would be coming out very often.
One thing I want,
Netflix gives you something to do.
when you run out of things, and I mean when we begin to have lesser things to choose from, if that happens, that one thing weekenders might do is go to a Sunday visit to one of the churches, like Unitarian Church or Unity or something like that.
Now, you can't speak in any tongue.
Other than saying retreat, I was just wondering if that was...
The horse show?
Was it just the horse show that we would go see and then that's it?
No, the horse show would be part of the outing at Fair Park. Right.
Well, if it's appropriate to even ask in more detail, I don't know if the others have this question, but in our discussion, we weren't sure if what would be interesting to us. And I think we're all agreed we'd like to start at the horse show, but maybe after a couple hours, we might feel that's enough and try something like the Beethoven concert, and then if we're bored with that, I don't know.
Well, have you been to the Fair Park? You haven't been to Fair Park. Now, others have been to Fair Park. And,
Well, let's find out what the horse show's all about.
well, who's been to horse show?
They do.
Well, what was it about? Was it any good?
Well, today it was, they had what they call classes with the stage horses, and some riders would come in and they'd go around and they'd say trot.
Well, let me ask you, was it interesting?
Well, it was interesting in some ways, but
Well, see, for a horse show,
watch
I
what
see.
they did and how they
Well,
did
see, it's at Fair Park. I'll tell you what we were thinking, that you wouldn't go and stay if it was boring any more than you go to the Beethoven concert and stay, which we told them, don't stay if it's boring. We thought, we were afraid that if we didn't say that and it was boring, you'd feel like you had to sit there the whole time, and which we didn't want you to do. And the same thing would apply to the horse show. Now, those who have gone to Fair Park, if you found the museums at all interesting, were they okay, huh?
There were a couple that were interesting.
Were they? Because if I was going to go to the horse show, then I'd probably also want to take those in, since other people had taken them in, because I don't know what else is going on at the grounds there. But it doesn't mean that while you were taking those in that you couldn't stop for 15, 20 minutes or whatever and listen to a little Beethoven if it happens to be going on that same day, right? Doesn't mean that since horse show's going on that you can't listen to a little bit of Beethoven, because you're not
You
going
can
to.
just do a lot of things. Remember when you went to Massa? How you had all those things to cover? And in a sense, this is the same thing.
Fair Park is kind of the same thing, things that you can cover without expenditure.
I'm not sure what he was trying to say about Shakespeare.
Well, we'll tell you more about it later, because it doesn't happen until August. And we were saying that it's a nighttime thing. It's
Which would be, you all could go
a
to.
performance, and we'll tell you more about it.
Since it lasts for 2 weeks, I think everybody would have a chance to go see it, if it's worth going to see.
Yeah.
We don't know. We'll see if the first ones choose to go there, first time it opens, then,
We'll find out from
then
them.
if they think it's worth going to see, then,
So, Yodi,
then you all choose to do it. What
Real
you
brief.
do.
Well, I was just picking up on how I was interpreting about it. So if we wanted to just hear a little Beethoven, would it be appropriate if we go into the middle or something that was started, or would we wait to an admission?
well, that would all depend upon what was happening there,
What kind of
what kind of
setup
setup it is. If people are flowing in and out, But even if people are flowing in and out, I wouldn't go up in the middle of the crowd during the middle of a piece. You know, even if others are doing it, because that's just a little too rude.
Is it outdoors?
In fact,
Then I would stay in the back of the room, sit on
Yeah.
the back seat.
yeah, that's good.
Back seat for the front.
Wait with the individuals that your vehicle wouldn't normally tend to practice it with.
Now, do you go back later and tell that individual, I got a sub for you because you forgot to get a sub?
Yeah.
No, you don't do that. Because then you would be defeating your purpose. There are many times that Doe steps in for me. And there are many times that I step in for Doe. And I doubt it. I know the times that from his mouth, I know the times that he stepped in for me, and I hope it's the same for him. In other words, we have learned to work together, and we want you all to learn to work together where you can help each other and get rid of the notes that, in a sense, like Doe said, are almost digs. It's getting rid of something that you are
It's using a procedure to accomplish another end that isn't procedure at all.
it isn't always that case, so don't get us wrong, but we do know we can feel the note in our hand. The ones that if you all are as sensitive as we think you're beginning to be, I think you know also when things aren't right with that note that is coming your way. So anyway, we don't want to spend all our time talking about this, but we do want you to work on it.
Sometimes I think you're all angels anyhow, and you really are. It's like you came down and you had to put on a suit of clothes, but they weren't fresh. They weren't fresh. You had to wear a suit of clothes to do a task in, and they probably all had BO. Okay, but maybe the suit that you chose had a BO that you got accustomed to, and that you could overlook. And so the other suits that had similar BO, you didn't smell. So they weren't offensive to you. Do you see what I'm saying? But the ones who chose the suits who had a smell that was quite different from the smell of your suit, it was very offensive to you. You'd even by that time forgotten that you also picked one that had BO to it, because you're so accustomed to it, you can't smell it. And you see what an analogy that is? Because that's really the way you are in those vehicles. Now, there is so much goodness in your minds. There's so much wisdom and goodness in your minds before you took those vehicles that we wanted to shine through more, and so that you don't see vehicles. Now, we're not talking about just seeing physical vehicles. You see what we're saying? Let's say that someone has a way of saying something. Isn't that still the vehicle? Or a tone of voice, or a way of twitching, or screwing their mouth, or something. Isn't that still the vehicle? If that's offensive to you, you're still seeing the vehicle. Just as much, now we've had this lesson a couple times in the last week or two, but you're still seeing the vehicle in the same way that you see other vehicles as a positive, having nothing offensive about them. Their mouth twists in about the same way your mouth twists, and their tone of their voice is about the same, and they have characteristics that are harmonious with yours. But yours are just as wrong, because they're still human characteristics. They're still vehicular characteristics. If you could see that, now I meant it when we said, in the truest sense, that your minds are very, very good. You have learned all the conduct that it took to get you to be in the kingdom of heaven. You have gone through that. And there is nothing offensive about your knife. Not one characteristic offensive about your knife, or aggressive, or that anyone could find any fault with. Therefore, when you find fault, or have negative feelings, or see negative things, you're still seeing vehicles. You're still seeing vehicles. And letting the vehicle do the feeling and having the response. Now, we know that you don't do it all the time, but this is one of the awful things about occupying a living plant that is stronger at times and weaker at times. I've noticed, for example, that the vehicle that I'm wearing is stronger at times if I have had an experience that I might call a decent night's sleep. But I'll wake up and I have to work harder at getting the mind in to have better control of it.
Everybody would have a chance to see it, if it's worth going to see. We don't know. We'll see if the first ones choose to go there, first time it opens, then
We'll find out from
then
them.
if they think it's worth going to see, then
So, Yodi,
then you all choose to do it. What
Real
you
brief.
do.
Well, I was just picking up on the thoughts and checking about it. If we want to just hear a little Beethoven, let's say, would it be appropriate to go into the middle or something that was started? Or would we wait for an admission?
well, that would all depend upon what was happening there, what kind of setup it is. If people are flowing in and out, but even if people are flowing in and out, I wouldn't go up in the middle of the crowd during the middle of a piece. You know, even if others are doing it, because that's just a little too rude.
Is it outdoors?
No.
In fact,
Then I would stay in the back of the room, sit on
Yeah.
the back seat.
yeah, that's good.
Back seat for the cover.
Wait with the individuals that your vehicle wouldn't normally tend to practice it with.
Now, do you go back later and tell that individual, I got a sub for you because you forgot to get a sub?
Yeah.
No, you don't do that. Because then you would be defeating your purpose. There are many times that Joe steps in for me. And there are many times that I step in for Joe. And I doubt if, I know the times that from his mouth, I know the times that he stepped in for me, and I hope it's the same for him. In other words, we have learned to work together, and we want you all to learn to work together where you can help each other and get rid of the notes that, in a sense, like Joe said, are almost digs. It's getting rid of something that you are
It's using a procedure to accomplish another end that isn't procedure at all.
It isn't always that case, so don't get us wrong, but we do know we can feel the note in our hand. The ones, and if you all are as sensitive as we think you're beginning to be, I think you know also when things aren't right with that note that is coming your way. So anyway, we don't want to spend all our time talking about this, but we do want you to work on it.
Sometimes I think you're all angels anyhow, and you really are. It's like you came down and you had to put on a suit of clothes, but they weren't fresh. They weren't fresh. You had to wear a suit of clothes to do a task in, and they probably all had BO. Okay, but maybe the suit that you chose had a BO that you got accustomed to, and that you could overlook. And so the other suits that had similar BO, you didn't smell. So they weren't offensive to you. Do you see what I'm saying? But the ones who chose the suits who had a smell that was quite different from the smell of your suit, it was very offensive to you. You've even by that time forgotten that you also picked one that had BO to it, because you're so accustomed to it, you can't smell it. Can you see what an analogy that is? Because that's really the way you are in those vehicles. Now, there is so much goodness in your minds. There's so much wisdom and goodness in your minds before you took those vehicles that we wanted to shine through more, and so that you don't see vehicles. Now, we're not talking about just seeing physical vehicles. You see what we're saying? Let's say that someone has a way of saying something. Isn't that still the vehicle? Or a tone of voice, or a way of twitching, or screwing their mouth, or something. Isn't that still the vehicle? If that's offensive to you, you're still seeing the vehicle. Just as much, now we've had this lesson a couple times in the last week or two, but you're still seeing the vehicle in the same way that you see other vehicles as positives, having nothing offensive about them. Their mouth twists in about the same way your mouth twists, and their tone of their voice is about the same, and they have characteristics that are harmonious with yours. But yours are just as wrong, because they're still human characteristics. They're still vehicular characteristics. If you could see that. Now, I meant it when we said, in the truest sense, that your minds are very, very good. You have learned all the conduct that it took to get you to be in the kingdom of heaven. You have gone through that. And there is nothing offensive about your mind. Not one characteristic offensive about your mind, or aggressive, or that anyone could find any fault with. Therefore, when you find fault, or have negative feelings, or see negative things, you're still seeing vehicles. You're still seeing vehicles, and letting the vehicle do the feeling and having the response. Now, we know that you don't do it all the time, but this is one of the awful things about occupying a living plant that is stronger at times and weaker at times. I've noticed, for example, that the vehicle that I'm wearing is stronger at times if I have had an experience that I might call a decent night's sleep. That I'll wake up and I have to work harder at getting the mind in to have better control of it. Even though I might initially say, oh, I'm finally got a decent night's sleep. But from past experience, I've learned that when I have lousy sleep, I can keep my vehicle under better control. It's tired. The vehicle's tired. It didn't get revived. The mind didn't recede so. Do you follow what we're saying? And when I get a good sleep, without my knowing it, before I even recognize it, I'll see certain characteristics come out that I know are purely vehicular characteristics. And so suddenly it dawns on me, got a good night's sleep. The vehicle got a good night's sleep. It's really feeling spiffy. It's really acting like if I would let it, it would act in some of its old characteristics that I keep muted all the time, as long as it's kept in a weakened condition. So, the thing you want to grow at this point is to have the advantage of knowing how wonderful every one of your classmates are. In other words, don't make them fight so to communicate without a vehicle. Do you follow what we're saying? if you could see their mind, if you could take the higher side on what they say and how they say it, you would see their mind, unless they've just really slipped for the moment and let the vehicle take over. Do you see what we're saying? But if you would keep the vehicle, that rein so tight that we've been talking about, on the vehicle, and never give it any freedom, there aren't 35 individuals anywhere that could possibly enjoy the company of others as well as you could. And I'm not talking about, that would be without question. That would be without exception. There wouldn't be except for so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. I really don't have any difficulty seeing the next level mind in so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. I only have difficulty seeing the next level mind in so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. Which means that I have not yet opened my next level eyes in regard to so-and-so and so-and-so. Doesn't mean anything's wrong with them. I guarantee you nothing is wrong. Nothing is wrong. Something's only wrong with my eyes if I find something there. So we want so badly for you to get a good grade on this test, and to, as quickly as you can, get the vehicle so under control that only you will be seen. It will be almost like your vehicles don't even exist. It would just be like minds coming together and communicating, and minds doing tasks. But I wish your vehicles were all just silver cloth, and all looked alike, and all sounded alike. But that would you wouldn't have much task, would you? You see what we're saying? So your task is to get to that point. Your task is to get to that point where that's all you see. You certainly don't see other things. And this is back to where T started. That you still something would have to be pretty offensive. A pretty good mound of crumbs left pretty consistently, to the degree that I know that individual doesn't have any idea that something is just causing them to be blinded to it, and I know that they wouldn't want me to not bring it to their attention, because I know that every single one of you want to do everything right? You don't want to have habits or ways that are outside of procedure or that are distasteful to members of the next level in any way. I know I don't. And it would really disappoint me if I thought that you were, if they were being overlooked. But the only way it's like I had with T, just as T did with me as we began to awaken, we had to let each other know by our actions, not by our words, those don't count, but by our actions, that we please don't ever let me do anything that seems to be unlike next level conduct. Please don't let me do it without knowing that I've done it. Do you see what I'm saying? Don't. If you can catch me being blinded at something, I would feel cheated if I don't know about it. But that doesn't mean that T's not going to pick up a potato chip that I dropped on the floor and turned around and didn't see it. And I'll never hear about the fact that Now, if every time I leave the table I dump half my plate on the floor, I hope to goodness T would tell me about it, that there's something about the way I turn that knocks that plate off every time. Do you see what I'm saying? But not to the degree that once in a while T would know that's not what I usually do. And so she'd pick up that chip, or push my chair into the table, or whatever little thing it is that is not my way. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's what we're getting at. That enough? Want to stop? We were talking a minute about certain genetic deficiencies that vehicles have, and we're trying to get it straightened out of what your task is with those genetic deficiencies or weaknesses or kinks, whether it's that, let's say, an individual might have difficulty in clearly thinking out a picture before they express it. And so they have to, one, recognize that their vehicle does not have good circuitry in thinking out something before it expresses it. So it desires and starts to practice thinking it out clearly before expressing it. Then it has to desire and start to practice the clear expression of what it has clearly thought out. Now, whether or not, and if you do all that you can to correct it, then you have made an A+. Whether or not the vehicle has ever gotten to the point, as a result of your effort, to make perfect picture perfectly expressed is unimportant. Because that depends upon how many generations that weakness has been there and how poorly developed that vehicle is. And you weren't sent and say, you've got X number of months to turn 10 generations around in that vehicle. Do you see what we're saying? But for the time that you're in that vehicle, your job is to recognize its less than next level development, its unhealthy ways, mentally, physically, everything. You recognize its shortcomings, its ways, its unhealthy ways, its primitive ways. And then your job is working with all your might against those primitive ways. Now, if you happen to have, let's take a minor problem of the vehicle, you might correct it, even, in a very short time. But you were still graded on the effort that it took. Now, let's say that it was a very minor problem, and therefore you didn't exert much effort, because you could cover the problem up. Good grade or bad grade? Bad grade. You follow what we're saying? Because maximum effort is your task on every single weakness that you can become aware of the vehicle. So if it's a little weakness, you still have to apply maximum effort, hoping that you can get it corrected very, very quickly. You don't want to anything left. You don't want to overlook it. You want to try to correct it. But let's say that it's a major weakness that even though you don't want to think it's impossible to correct, because the human vehicle has a characteristic of if it thinks it's impossible to correct, why work so hard on it? You see? Because, and if you let the vehicle think that, then you're not going to do your 100% effort. So the only way you can force the vehicle to stay in line in order that your mind might apply the effort that it is tasked to apply, you have to believe and convince that vehicle it is accomplishable. Now, if at the end of your task you gave 100% effort in accomplishing the control and change of all those weak areas, I forgot how I started that sentence. If you, let's say it's the end of your task and you applied full effort, but certain weak areas or primitive areas are still not corrected. Let's say they're very obvious, something you can see easily. Like we mentioned Branody's difficulty with her vehicle. That is a handicap. That is a genetic difficulty with that vehicle. Now her task is to apply 100% of her next level mind in how she is to look at that, how she is to not let it interfere with her, how she is to keep a positive effort toward correcting it, how she is to be determined that it does not have to be an interference, it is improving, it is, I can get this under better control by doing this, I'm not going to let it change my moods, I'm not going to worry about what others say about whether or not it takes me too long to get in from the car. I'm not going to be concerned about what they say. All I'm concerned about is I hope I'm making a good grade with the next level on applying 100% effort to correct this deficiency in this vehicle. Now, what is totally unimportant, I'm repeating, what is totally unimportant is how much correction is actually made in the object that is the tool of your correction. Because that's not what you're graded on. You're graded on the amount of effort that you apply to correct that deficiency. And that is what does the most good for also the message that you're sending out for others who have that same problem to deal with. But the only reason you don't want to think about it's unimportant whether or not the end result is perfect correction is because the human brain will then try to intercede at its primitive level and say, well, if this looks like I can't reach the accomplished stage of completely licking this problem, then why am I working so hard? It would almost be better if none of you stood a chance of correcting any of those things, and you were graded on, because then you wouldn't be disappointed if it wasn't corrected, if you knew that it could not be corrected. Do you see what we're saying? But that your task was the application of the effort to correct it. Can you follow that? Does that make sense to you?
Well,
Okay.
if you know that the effort that you're exerting is effective, that alone ought to be beneficial.
It's effective for the task that you're doing.
Right. No matter what you do.
Do you really care ultimately whether the vehicle that you're wearing ends up without those difficulties? No. It's not going to serve anybody. That vehicle's going to be thrown in the garbage one day. Really? Right? So do you care? Now, what you care is what you are programming out there as you work against that vehicle, as you work to overcome that vehicle's deficiencies and primitive ways. Right? So you don't really care what the end result is. Now, but don't look at that wrong now. Don't look at it as a human would and say, well, then why am I going to try? Because that's the way a human thinks. A human says that like an old man who's so getting so many ailments that he finally just says, well, why don't I just accept that I'm an old man, loaded down with all these ailments, and I'm just not going to push against it any longer. I'll just let it close in on me. At that point, that you should ever, on any single deficiency your vehicle has, if you take that attitude, you've made an F on that effort. Because yours was not to, your task was to work against it for as long as you're here. To work against it. Because your task is what you're sending out here for others to pick up on. Right? And so, goodness, I wish I could. Here I feel like the frustration that Jan Odie feels sometimes. I feel like I've got a picture that I'd give anything if I could just transfer a la floppy diskette or whatever it is into your computers and have you receive the picture as complete as I see it. Okay. Stanley asked a question about we're going to have to, we've got something we've got to do, we're going to have to call it quits, about his list of his program for his task and worrying about the wording of it. And we just brought up that probably from now until you leave, whether or not you turn it into links is going to be whether or not we get the whether or not we give you instruction or we get the instruction to have you continue to turn them into links. But your job is to see those things more and more from the vantage point of your next level mind, as deficiencies and weaknesses are undeveloped areas of the vehicle, relative to the prize vehicle, which is one that has become perfectly healthy and void of all primitive ways. So you will be improving and changing your list, but for now, you send us one, and if in a week or so you think you've got one that you've got more mind in, and you can see it from a higher vantage point, then you can send it to us again, and we'll throw them away, and see how much more mind you have forced in order to see it. One thing that's funny to me, Jan Odie was talking about this confusion that comes in, the difficulty of getting a thought clearly and getting it out. The task you're on in itself brings that difficulty to all of you, to your teachers and to every member of the class, even if your vehicle relatively had no difficulty with clear picture and clear expression. Believe it or not, there's not a human vehicle on the face of the earth from next level standards that has even 50% clear picture and clear expression. So you're only comparing one with another. You see what we're saying? And your task, since you're coming into a primitive vehicle, that even what other primitive vehicles would consider A+, clear picture and clear expression, you're coming in and merely by the presence of your next level mind in that brain and attempting to speak through that brain next level thought does all kinds of short circuiting on clear picture and clear expression. This is why we and you've got to learn how to get used to that problem and try to change its program. Because the best program it could possibly have is not good enough to take. It's like a computer that can't handle a program. Your next level mind way of thinking, you don't have a computer that can handle it. So what you've got to learn is the trick of how to get it through it, even though it isn't built to handle it. You see what we're saying? Now this, years ago, we used to translate as how our minds affected our vehicles. Do you remember? And how it caused us difficulty in speech? Well, the same thing is happening with you. If you're having no difficulty with speech, it's because you're thinking too low. Or you're expressing yourself too low. One or the other, or both. Because if you're letting next level thoughts be expressed, you have all kinds of short circuits happening automatically in a primitive brain. And your job is, can I get them through there, learn the tricks of jerry-rigging my brain so that I can come out with next level expression of thought.
But in the process of doing that, you're helping the little humans, the plants outside, to get in control of their vehicle.
At a much higher level.
They too can get in control of their brains and make them function.
That's right. You can't imagine how what you're doing, what accelerating favor it is doing for the human plants. I mean, the chief is blessing them with miracle growth during your presence. I'm not kidding. With a potent, long-term dose of miracle growth during your presence. Now, we got to stop.